Sila, Regina, Naloga, pleased to be driving this discussion along my panelists that I'm yet to introduce to you, with a look at research showing that over 70% of the global population currently live in some form of autocracy. Now, democratic backsliding is occurring in many countries, including some liberal democracies that have substantial economic, political, and military influence. While motivations and strategies of backsliding can differ, a common phenomenon is that regimes and leaders undermine both government and non-government institutions and actors that should keep them in check. Now, while these trends are definitely concerning, there are hopes and signs of defiance and resilience of authoritarianism, though some countries have managed to reverse this in one way or another. And so there is an ongoing debate on the democratic backsliding and resilience that has focused on government, institution, the diverse strategies deployed by the actors to stay in power, and how institutions as well as organized actors might resist, such as legal action by civil society or organized opposition like mass protests. Now, concerning fights about young people's attitudes towards democracy show that young people around the globe have far less faith in democracy than do the adults, and declining participation and trust in government institutions is bad for democracy, as we have seen from the scenes of Kenya that can tell of this in the recent weeks. Now, while many countries are under a test of democracy, Rwanda, the United States of America, Kenya, etc., this morning we want to focus on the participation of young people in democratic processes. Now, I'm pleased to be having young people on my panel this morning, joined by Ashram Kakaire, manager with Open Space. We also do have a legal person here to give us her perspective, and that is Marion Chirabo. So I'm going to allow them their salutations, and then we'll continue on, starting with my immediate left.
Thank you so much, listener, our viewers at Morning at NTV. I'm delighted to be here once again. My name is Ashraf Kakaire. I'm a civil society leader, and I work with Open Space Center, an entity whose work embodies broadening space and opportunities for young people to unlock their full potential. Happy to be here today. Okay,
all right. Marion?
Thank you to our viewers for having us on the show this morning. My name is Marion Chirabo. I'm a lawyer, but also a team leader at an organization called Next Gen Women Initiative that aims at promoting women's participation in politics and governance.
Okay, all right. Now let's first take an understanding into the disillusionment of democracy. What is it from your perspective, especially with young people, given the fact that now it's official as far as Uganda is concerned, we have a huge young population before us. I'll start with you, Ashraf.
I think there is a shift currently where young people think they are young people at the right time, and they feel that the representation that they have seem not to be answering the questions, and also seem not to be providing solutions to issues that affect them. This age and era where young people feel they have the energies and they can also, based on what they know, to take charge of their countries. But we've been also realizing that maybe there is a huge problem, and for me the gap would be a failure by African countries and also states to own democracy, to define democracy for themselves, and also to understand democracy. When you look at the drivers of democracy in our countries, these are the political parties. All these political parties have an ideology from outside the African continent. So that means people are pushing for something that they do not understand. Maybe we need to go back to the drawing table to help Africans redefine what democracy is for them and which kind of democracy that they can take part of. When you look at some of the democracies that we practice in Africa, particularly in Uganda, these are representative democracy, a democracy where you vote and entrust part of your powers to a specific leader to take charge of some of the social issues in your country. But then we do not at some point also respect the powers that we gave to them, because you do not expect each and every time for the members of parliament, for the councillors to come and consult, you know, the masses at each and everything. Sometimes they have to decide on our behalf. So I think generally my general observation is that we need, as Africa, to go back to the drawing table to try to redefine what democracy is for us and which kind of democracy that you want to participate in.
In that regard, then, what is your opinion of the latest protests that we are seeing with the young people in Kenya now pushing for the resignation of their sitting president?
Interesting. First of all, as a person, I want to say that what the young people did to come at the forefront to push for issues that they think makes a lot of sense to them was a great move. But the way that this was done, from my personal view and also the organization that I represent, we believe in debate and dialogue. We believe that we can talk about issues that affect us and also look for lasting solutions other than coming and distracting and, you know, demolishing everything. So it will be very expensive for Kenya to ensure that they build up whatever they have lost in this, you know, financial year or even in the coming financial year. But also this speaks to the populism kind of campaigns that our leaders do. When you look at the Kenya Kwanza campaign for Mzee for Dr. the current president of Kenya, he had a lot of promises with no clear plans on how these promises will be effected. And also that comes back to our home here. During the general elections, you come and hear people promising that when I become a president, the policeman will get 1 million. Where is this money going to come from? I don't want to sound like I'm, you know, providing a side, but what I mean is in the populism kind of campaigns, we need to be realistic. So Mr. Ruto made a lot of promises that he may not be in position to fulfill. So that made him, you know, even act on pressure. I think statesmen do not work like that, and I feel Kenya is making a lot of mistakes. If there was room to listen to these young people, to the Z movement, and talk to them, it would be better.
All right, so the hustler's hustler is being hustled in regards to what you are putting out. Ashraf raises some interesting points here, that as young people, we think that fighting our way will actually get us the things that we deserve, and yet that's not necessarily democracy. Marion, from where you're seated, is this disillusionment in democracy?
Well, protests are part of a democratic process. I mean, they're even embedded in our constitution. The right to assemble, the right, freedom of speech, the right to protest is really a democratic guaranteed right, I would say, to put it in simple terms. What the Kenyan youth did was within their right to do. But also when you speak about disillusionment, you can't really blame them if that's the only choice that you've given them. This is not the first time Kenyans are talking about taxes. In 2023, this same government, the Ruto government, did put in place a certain taxes, again, that were affecting the common man. And indeed, those taxes also led to another round of protests, and he had to withdraw some of those hikes. He goes ahead, even when, as I was seeing reports that he was well aware that this was going to happen again, because now the new taxes that he had put in place were really on basic needs of people: cooking oil, bread, you know, pads, things that were essential to people's lives. But also this is a country coming, just like any other country around the world, coming out of a pandemic, but also being put in an economic, how can I say, hole that was actually caused more by political decisions that their leaders. Unfortunately for Ruto, that he inherits an economy, though you could say that he was also part of the Uhuru government, he inherits an economy that is in disarray, a country debt of about 82 billion US dollars. So he then reaches out to the IMF to try and, you know, revive his economy. But you continuously borrow. Of course, the person who is giving you this money is going to charge a lot of conditions on you, like the IMF always does. The problem is that even before we go to the IMF and the loans that were given, the Kenyan government before Ruto had been borrowing a lot of money that was going into infrastructure, but really there were no immediate returns on this money. This investments did not particularly lead to the recovery of the economy. But also
in real time.
Yeah, in real time. But also it makes matters worse when every year there's a report that your government officials are embezzling money, they're embezzling funds. And instead of saying, okay, we have a big debt, our economy is not doing fine, can we try to curb corruption? Can we try to reduce on expenditure? Kenyans are saying that you are instead financing offices that really have no value to the economy. Office of the First Lady, office of the Deputy,
does that
the wife of the
disillusionment in any way? How does that tally to
well, it just shows you that even when we have voiced these things, because Kenyans have been voicing these things, like I said, during their protests last year. These are the same things they have been talking about. Actually, what we see as the Kenyan protests of this year have just been a continuous advocacy. Listen to us, until they felt that they could take it no more and took to the streets.
Okay.
So what happens if you have a democracy that does not impact your lives positively? Of course, then you start thinking, okay, if my leader that I elected is not listening to me, like most of the parliamentarians, the cabinet ministers were just shutting down, but these kids are
then they have the opportunity to wait for the next election and weigh their current leader to see if they put them back in office or not. But away from that, you have mentioned something about leaders and the fact that democracy has simply not delivered, especially towards the young people. Now, in particular, you do have respect to the generating decent employment. One of the issues, of course, using the example of Uganda and Kenya, maybe East Africa by and large, is the continued youth unemployment, and yet the numbers for young people are also enlarging day in, day out. So it begs the question, what are the actual primary frustrations that young people have, and yet they hold the torch to Africa's development? For example, if you're going to riot against pads and cooking oil, and the reason why they're doing is these are things that you use on a daily, meaning that is going to be ripple income for the government to be able to offer you services. So that mindset of not understanding or telling as to why things have to happen through democracy. Ashraf?
I think using Kenya as an example in our conversation today here, because it is the speaking point, Kenya has a population currently of about 55 million. And 80% of that population is between 15 and 35 years old. Like she said, it's true and it's factual that the president and the cabinet saw this coming, because on social media we are in those groups. We've happened to have been programming in Kenya for about 5 years under the university debate programs. So we've been seeing circulations of communiques in the WhatsApp groups, and for over 90 days these people seem not to react. That's where I think Mr. Ruto's government went wrong. But also on issues that these young people were raising on issues of corruption, embezzlement, but also like she said that Mr. Ruto comes in at a point where the economy is performing so poorly. And Mr. Ruto's strategy was that let's stop doing so much of now borrowing money, so that we go into either domestic borrowing, but also increasing on a tax base to be in position to provide the services. And these young people seem not to be hearing and also liking the position of the president. But also when you look at the population of Kenya, I've worked with young people in Kenya, and when you look at the population of Kenya as compared to Uganda, they are so much informed and educated at this time in point. So that's why you saw at this time around this mistrust coming in and not being read by Mr. Raila Odinga, who was actually out of the country on his UN bid. And you having the young people themselves, coming out to shout. But also, I think there is a gap and mismatch, because young people also ought to understand how governments operate. What are the processes? I had very many talking about the Hasra Fund. It came in the first financial year, then the second financial year it was recorded, probably because the money was not there. And it goes back to my first point of populism kind of campaigns, other than issue-based campaigns. Okay. So you get a hungry population of young people who are fighting for what they think is, you know, there is also something with bread. You remember in the King Louis, you know, downfall of French Revolution, it was about the tax on the bread. You remember in Somalia, it was the bread. Then in Kenya, so let Uganda be very careful. They're not tax on the bread.
All right. Ashraf brings out a very poignant point here. The way youth are actually voicing their issues and trying to be part of democracy. One of the continuous used platforms right now is social media. We have seen the hashtag #EndSARS. This is in regards to Nigeria and its young people. Kenya here back in 2019, we saw Sudan also through young people taking it for social media, and then they took action. But then it begs the question, are these the right approaches for getting involved in democratic processes?
Well, if your leaders are not listening to you, what other option do you have? Do you wait for 4 years while you're starving? I mean, if they have increased bread, are you going to tell a young person that for the next, Ruto has is it 3 more years? 3 more years?
Enough.
So are they going to not have bread and cooking oil for 3 more years until they can voice? I think if we're asking that question, look at the reaction that the parliamentarians first gave the young people at the beginning of this protest, when they hadn't even gone so far. The young people called they first started with dialogue actually. They said, reach out to your MPs and tell them we reject this bill as people of Kenya, and these are the reasons we are giving you. They even went, because you know the MPs had already shut all avenues of dialogue. They went as far as social media, which all of us saw. The whole world saw it, and they issued out the reasons why they are rejecting the finance bill. And there were legitimate reasons, really. Do you want me to go hungry? I will not be able to access medical care if these certain taxes. Why don't, and they even went ahead to give solutions. Why don't you cut government expenditure? There are some things that you do that are very unnecessary. There's no reason why you should be flying all over the country when your economy is suffering, because that takes a lot of money. Yeah. Can you give us accountability for some of these conferences that you go for? Why does your first lady, should she have access to, what kind of work does she do that she should have access to what? To taxpayers' money? These were legitimate concerns, and the young people gave them, and no one listened. So where you have no voice, that even the people that you have elected, perhaps this is also a dent on the kind of, we should be asking ourselves what kind of leaders we put in parliament. If after the election suddenly we have no control over them as a what? As a citizenry. Can we think about bringing laws like, how can we recall our parliaments? Do we have to wait for the next election? Because by the time the next election comes, you might be starving, you know? It might be too late. So those are things maybe we need to think. But you create a situation where you give people no choice, young people no choice, but to actually go to the streets and protest. So I don't think it's fair for us to say that, you see that these young people, the first thing that they resort to is violence and what. Moreover, their protests in the beginning were actually very peaceful, only that there were reports of it being hijacked. But I think all this could have been avoided if the president and his cabinet and MPs had listened to their people.
All right. Ashraf, does it help that we are seeing a trajectory in African leaders with the recent elections ushering in younger leaders? You do have the Traores up north, you do have the Fires down south, and it begs the question, are these going to be able to answer the issues of the young people with the democracies that they are inheriting?
With the current situations, I think no, it will not be a solution to the issues that we have. If we take it back for 3 years back, William Ruto was he was either the first or second youngest president in Africa. Then 2 years ahead, he looks like one of the oldest.
Right.
I know he's twist. Now you have a new breed from West Africa, the Senegal, and all those people that are coming in with fresh, ideas and also young ages. For me, I think the problem is not who is the president and which age bracket do they have. The problem is which systems are we, developing to ensure that everyone in the country will have an equal share on the national cake, but also most important, the policies that we pass. But that reminds me of a very famous quote from Mr. Paul Kagame, the president of Rwanda, where I said that he urges Africa to start mobilizing the right mindset other than more funding in Africa. We have a mentality of thinking that nothing will work because we do not have foreign aid. And he went ahead and said that Africa has reached at this time when we are even begging for what we have. So there is a dynamic shift from the donor, money, and also the funding from the Western world. You get it? So when that changes, as African states, we need to understand on how are we going to survive minus the donor money. COVID hit almost all of us, and the most powerful countries in this world borrowed too much money. They did that non-African. If you combine all the African debts, you cannot get. But at what rate, if you could ask yourself, what rate did the Americans and others? And Kenya is not the most indebted country, neither Uganda, in the world. It's the United States of America. But why are we not having such issues in the US? So I think there is that shift in funding, and as Africans we need to appreciate and understand how are we going to survive minus the donor money. Bring
it back home. We do have some programs that have been intended to elevate youth and their plight. For example, the Gawari, Myoga. Now we do have the parish development model. Now, while these look like they're steered for social development, they also seem to be aligned with democratic affiliation and soliciting for whatever political agendas that could be of the political parties that form up these things. For the case of Uganda, is this something that young people have as a low-hanging fruit, and yet its agenda could be different altogether?
I think Uganda, like Zimbabwe and other African countries, have tried to roll out these youth programs to kind of maybe cool tempers of young people, because it's boiling. Unemployment levels, high levels of poverty, high cost of living. So you are really dealing with a ticking time bomb. So it's kind of like, here let's get you into the economy in some way. But you see, as long as you don't fix the economy, it doesn't matter how much money you're going to throw at young people. You get?
All right. So our time is fast spent. Let's talk about the fixes in a minute. Mario, fixes.
Well, the first fixes would be that we need to, first of all, I would, as a person, I encourage what Kenyans are doing. I think young people all over the country should emulate Kenya, because the thing is that most African countries suffer under bad leadership.
All right.
And we have no other way. Perhaps
bad leadership is here. All right. My time is fast spent, but hopefully we can continue this conversation, because these are narratives that are still living with us. For now, of course, you can find the link to this conversation on our YouTube channel, NTV Uganda. Otherwise, thank you so much for having been with us on Morning at NTV. We wish you a good day.